Right, good morning. This is the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission's open meeting on Thursday, August 7th. It's 10 a.m. Go ahead and get started with the
Commissioner Nyberg, Commissioner Aguilera,
president.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Present.
All commissioners are here and you have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
We have an agenda before us today, commissioners. I do know of one item that we might need to check the calculations on, and staff sent us an email suggesting a potential different path forward, but suffice it to say that for today, 2400154 UT, which is an item by El Paso Electric. It's recommended by our staff that we remove it from the agenda for today. And I don't know if there's any discussion on that, but that's the only change that I had. Do you have any comments or other changes?
Are we for staff going to contact them with a letter or something?
Yes, we want to double check, and if there are some corrections needed, the recommendation is to issue a bench request. And then we, after receiving the response, and potentially an updated advice notice, we take this item. Okay, then seeing no other changes, I would move to adopt the agenda before us today with the change that I just noted.
Commissioner O'Connell?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Yes.
Commissioner Nyberg? The motion to approve the agenda as amended passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Next item is the announcements section, and I realize that I've been just kind of with the announcement, but we said that we had general counsel going first. And just jump right into it. So maybe this time I'll follow the agenda and see if our general counsel has an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It just so happens I do have one quick announcement. Today is the last open meeting day that OGC's intern will be here in the office. Her name is Abigail Nudie. She goes by Abby. Some of you have maybe had the pleasure of meeting her. She's helped us out this summer working on some projects. It's been a real pleasure having her here. We're sorry to see her go. I was just thinking about it this morning. Hopefully, we will see her in another year or two once she finishes up law school and looking for a place to work. So just wanted to put that out.
Great. Well,
Oh, and there she is.
thank you, Abby. Hope you learned a lot. I have a few announcements. We don't have any hearings scheduled between now and our next open meeting. Did want to note that for the procedural rulemaking in docket number 23-119, initial written comments on the updates to our procedural rules that are proposed are due on August 21. And these rules, again, determine how the public and interveners interact with the PRC. They're also known as Robert's rules because Mr. Robert Lundeen is leading the rulemaking. Are there any rules that aren't Robert? So if you have any business or interest before the commission, we certainly would like to hear your comments and there are rules that could potentially affect the way you interact with this commission. So please take a look at that. And there will also be an opportunity to make public comments on these rules. A hearing for that will be held on August 28th. Moving on September 2nd, we are going to have a workshop in the Grid Readiness and Economic Development series to discuss special contracts and tariffs for large loads. That workshop is going to be entirely virtual. And the docket number for that is 24-257. On September 3, we're going to have another workshop, so back-to-back meetings. That's in our wildfire preparedness series. That meeting will be hybrid, and the docket for that is 22-154. And lastly, I wanted to recognize Joan Ellis, who retired recently, and want to appreciate the work that she's done for this agency, which occurred over a very long stretch of time. I heard rumors that she was here for 31 years and myths that she was here for 42 or more years. It turns out that she was here for 38 years. Pause for a second to let that sink in. Because for someone to give that much of their life to an agency is just incredible. And that's the real public service, which is very much appreciated. So thank you for the service in the state. Commissioners, any comments or announcements that you would like to make?
I just echo your appreciation for Joan Ellis. That is a remarkable.
Okay, so now we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Do we have anybody in person wishing to provide public comment? Looks like not. And Mr. Rodriguez, do we have anybody online for public comment?
Mr. Chair, we don't have anyone for public comment online.
Thank you. We have two prior meeting minutes on today's agenda for approval. These are meeting minutes for the open meeting on July 10 and the special open meeting on July 17. I noticed there were some small corrections that were made in board effect, and I included some similarly small corrections. Are there any other changes to those? Right. Then I would move to approve the two sets of meeting minutes on our agenda today.
Second.
Commissioner Nyberg? Commissioner Aguilera?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell?
Yes.
The motion to approve the minutes for the July 10th, 2025 regular open meeting and the July 17th, 2025 special open meeting passes. If you have a second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent action items, we have 3 items in today's agenda in this section. Are there any comments on any of the items? Looks like no comments, so I will move to adopt the 2 items on the consent action section of our agenda. Can we do a vote on that?
Commissioner O'Connell?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Yes.
Commissioner Nyberg? Yes. The motion to approve the consent action items passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Now, for the regular action items, as our first item, we have 25-00046 UT. This is an item led by Mr. Robert Lundeen. I'll turn it over to you.
Morning, commissioners.
Morning.
So back in June, in docket 24-157, which was rulemaking on the energy efficiency rule, the commission issued a final order and adopted a new final rule for energy efficiency. That docket was focused on energy savings targets for electric public utilities. However, there was two commenters in that docket who advocated for the commission to open a new rulemaking on demand savings targets. Those were MNERD and WRA. Ultimately, the commission agreed and stated that it would open a docket and establish a working group. So for today, I have to present to you an order that would establish that working group. After the final order was issued back in June, I reached out to the service list of 24-157 to gauge interest in working group. So obviously WRA and MNERD who requested that it be commenced or included, but several other parties that represent a pretty broad range of interests across industry, governmental organizations, and advocacy organizations. So the list of names of persons that would comprise the working group are Exhibit A, and I stand for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked that this be removed from the consent calendar to put on the regular action calendar because I wanted to engage in at least some discussion with you all about whether this is the proper time, and whether even a rule is necessary. And we have placed upon the backs of our staff and the utilities and the interveners a great burden the last, I suppose it goes beyond a year, but we have a number of rulemakings that we're currently going through. We've gone through a number of rulemaking, and as I'm becoming more familiar with the process, I'm beginning to realize that these rulemakings take a lot of time and energy. And for the ratepayers, that translates into the dollars. So, you know, we put more rules out. It requires more employees, I suppose, at the utilities. Those costs will ultimately get paid by the ratepayers. Likewise, our staff. We need to do this. We're going to need more staff to engage in those efforts. He asked me to expand our budget. So I thought this might be a time to discuss that issue, and then whether or not this is the proper time of year or proper time to do it in light of what is in the pipeline now and what is projected to be in the pipeline. So I thought we should have taken. I don't have any problem with forming this work group and discuss those issues, but I would like to get some idea as to what is on our plate, your plate, the agency's plate, likewise translate to the plates of those who are interested in these issues. So, Mr. Levine, how many rulemakings are we currently engaged in?
So there are several rulemakings in different phases of the process. The two that are currently in the formal phase, which is NOPR has been issued, and we're collecting public comments and preparing final orders. That's the grid mod rule and procedural rules rulemaking. Those two are kind of big units, and they're both mine. So it does take quite a bit of my time to do those. I have additionally a few others, including this one, that are kind of like in the works, but they're not fully fledged like formal rulemakings yet. As far as the other attorneys in OGC, I believe similarly they have, you know, there's a few rulemakings out there that are in the either infancy or in formal days, but not yet overstood.
Thank you. request that was made of us to engage in this rulemaking, or say engage in this rulemaking to study whether or not, I guess a consensus could be reached and maybe suggest some rule, would be a better way of phrasing it. And that's one concern I have with the proposed order, is that it presupposes that rulemaking will be the end product. So for myself, I would like the order to reflect that the working group is going to look at the issues and determine whether or not the rules even necessary. And give them, don't presuppose it becomes necessary, but give them the right to discuss whether or not a rule is necessary. If it is, and they reach consensus, report back to us. But there's several things in here that I guess my reading presuppose that a rulemaking would result. Some of that language is paragraph 6. Yeah, it basically says prepare or draft and file a straw proposal. I presume the straw proposal is a view. Is that not what it is?
Commissioner, I guess my understanding of straw proposal is more like an outline, so it's very early stages of a recommendation, but in my imagination, it was not, the results of this order will not get us that close to having like rule language yet. Like it would still be a very much an iterative process to get to that point. It would be a stakeholder-led process, which is a good thing because it would limit the resources being initiative and use. But it would also be somewhat lengthy because starting from now, we're at a complete blank slate as far as demand side determined. So it would take the record get to the point of having rule.
Before I explore that straw, you use the word demand saving targets. I went back to the statute. I didn't see any demand savings targets. I saw some energy efficiency targets, but I didn't see demand savings targets in the statute.
So in the energy, the Efficient Use of Energy Act, it is more focused on energy savings, energy efficiency measures, but there are a few mentions of demand savings throughout, but not like, for instance, it doesn't have demand savings targets the same way that it has energy savings targets such as 5% of sales. So yeah, part of the scope of this rulemaking is to figure out what this issue even is, because we still don't really like have a full grasp of it. And the scope and the depth of it, like you said, whether it's necessary or desirable. So really since we're on a clean slate, we can analyze any facet of this issue that you want to.
And so this, going back to get the right terminology, straw proposal, you're envisioning kind of an outline of would it be an outline of issues, or would it be an outline of big concepts?
I think that's generally kind of what I'm thinking. I use the term straw proposal in the order because I couldn't think of anything like less than that. It seems like kind of a minimal type of recommendation we can request. But yes, it would be more of like an outline. At least that's how I understand the term straw proposal. But I wouldn't expect to get very specific information back from the working group such as specific language.
this order requires a straw proposal to be submitted. And I'm wondering how would that occur if the consensus can't be reached among the members of the work group? We're forcing them to submit something, but if they don't reach consensus, there's no straw proposal they could come up with. But it seemed to me we needed to put some language in that would couch it such that if consensus is reached, then they would submit the straw proposal and other relevant information that they heard. But the consensus isn't reached, it's still requiring the straw proposal under the language of the order.
Yes, Commissioner, and I agree with that. My attempt was to convey that we want consensus from the working group. So we have experience in the past in establishing working groups where they'll file their recommendation, and within the recommendation, it's like, oh, these entities choose this position, these entities choose this position, there's no consensus, and then we're basically just kind of litigating the issue, and it's not that helpful purpose of establishing work. So that's why I use the word consensus in there, and my intent was that the working group would not file something without consensus. It does say shall file straw proposal. Perhaps we can massage that portion.
And then over on paragraph B, on the last page, the word stakeholders used, and I was reading that as meaning, maybe the people on exhibit A, are those the stakeholders or stakeholders person? Can any person, file comments, or is it just the people within this, realm of,
Thank you, Commissioner. The way I use the term stakeholder is usually to refer to anyone. Sometimes we say person, but also we have entities that file comments. So you could also say any person or entity. But traditionally, I think we usually just use the term stakeholder to simplify.
I think person includes entities, generally. I know when I read stakeholder, it seems to me to be a more limited group than person. We're asking for anybody to comment. I'd say person. So my real concerns is that it uses the word demand savings targets. I didn't find them in targets. So my preference would be to leave the word targets when it's used with the word demand saving. There's also the word demand savings requirements. I didn't see any demand savings requirements. I saw an obligation on the utilities to discuss the issue and submit to us some reports on that issue, but it was really a one-way street. They're reporting to us. There was really no requirements that detailed whether their information was good, bad, or different. They just reported it by the statute. You have a different reading of the statute.
Commissioner, so the term targets and requirements, that relates back to the original request of NMPRC and WRA, the two commenters who requested that a docket be open on this issue. So I think their intent was for the commission to establish rules that would set targets and requirements.
But in the fourth line of the order, the commission establishes a working group to address the issue of demand savings targets. That's us. That's not what, I mean, they requested it, but that's us telling them what we're expecting. And I would not use the word target in that sentence. Now, requirements down in paragraph 1, see your point. Again, it's a request. I think we could do without the word requirement there. Over on finding number 4, again, this is our words. Commission finds to address the issue of demand savings targets. I think we ought to strike the word target because there is no target in statute. And then I would make it, I would expand that sentence to say, and whether it should move forward in a rulemaking process to give them the ability to tell us whether or not the rulemaking is appropriate or not. And I would modify paragraph 6 a little bit to reflect that if they don't reach consensus, they're not doing anything. They're not having to file a strong proposal because there's no consensus. The statute requires us to remove barriers. Very specific statute tells us, the commission, and we have to do everything we can to remove barriers to these processes. And rulemaking is usually seen as a barrier. And I'll just the other concern, do we have any idea of what the public utilities are doing in the sphere of demand savings? Have we done anything to patch them? I know they're supposed to report, but have we done anything to inquire of them what they're doing in that realm to see if there's a problem?
I guess, Commissioner, demand savings are typically addressed in utilities triennial efficiency plan cases. I know each of the utilities have some sort of demand side programs. So it's there. It's not a large component of their energy efficiency plans, but it is something that is continuously talked about and addressed. I think the comments of WRA and Emmerich and the previous rulemaking for that, the energy efficiency rule doesn't do enough to incentivize demand savings. But to respond to something earlier that you said, so the commission in the final order in 24-157 did conclude that it would open the docket demand savings targets, so that issue was settled in that order. If that wasn't clear.
We opened the docket to follow up. It seems that if I understand the demand goals in energy efficiency, I can get my head around energy efficiency a lot easier than demand goals. But energy efficiency, I can understand why there's targets. With money, lights to be more efficient, insulation to be the home better insulated. And that's something I can grasp and understand. The demand goals is more amorphous, and yet we're trying to as it do it. So if I every conference I've gone to since the start of the year is that demand is not only increasing, demand is exploding. 2 days ago, talked about the explosion of demand for electricity and the need for additional transmission, additional infrastructure to meet those demands in safety. Not maybe fully cognizant of what the demand goals are. Certainly don't understand the target. I have done red lines on the final order. There, I'd be happy to share these red lines with you and Commissioner O'Connell. The rest of it is basically just to give a little more weasel room to the work group, allow them to move forward with not tell them what to come up with. I did change in one person. My last comment, is the, I noticed on the work group that, and maybe this is just how it is, but the group that's not present, there's nobody present representing the average rate there. Maybe the AG's office doesn't want to be involved in it, but we're not hearing from that. We're not getting that voice. It's becoming more concerned. I wish we saw more advocacy of that. I don't know whether this is an appropriate rulemaking for them to be engaged in. That's I think something could be deficient. So, Mr. Chair, my comments would be, I'd like to see a few words taken out. I'd like to see maybe a little more wiggle room. If you're Mr. O'Connell agree, I would make the motion. If you guys don't agree, then you can take my remarks for what they're worth. We can move on. But I am concerned whether, I think we ought to form the work group, and if they do recommend a rulemaking, I do think we ought to really look critically at what time of year, when in the future should we do that rulemaking and try to spread some. Those would be my.
I'm happy to respond. Question here is, and for me, it's really, was it better to hash this issue out in 3 separate utility cases? That might be right, because each utility is different. Or is it better to provide guidance in the rule? I don't know which will happen first. To your point, just what we heard this week, first of all, just the concepts, demand savings, load management, demand response, they're all the same things. Broadly, the price of things to serve demand, like transmission lines, and recently CCN was approved out in Kansas that had such an high water large price for a gas plant that I did not believe that was true. I had that. We got an answer from Miguel. He looked at it again. I talked to Commissioner Prince in Kansas. He said, yep, that's what does a gas plant cost these days. So demand is growing, but it's growing in a world where the facilities that utilities install to serve demand are extremely expensive. So going back to my which is going to happen first question, my expectation, if these things we're seeing around the country show up when we get RFP results from SPS, E&M, and watching what EPE does with their IRP assumptions, that's going to come with a, I'm going to try to reopen every energy efficiency and demand case because they were built on wrong assumptions. So there isn't a target in terms of megawatts, in terms of demand signals. There is a plus B equals C target in our set of rules. So A is utilities are required to spend a certain amount of money on energy efficiency and demand response. That's in the law. Then IRP says that you must pursue all cost-effective demand side options. And so in this world where transmission, generation are expensive, what is cost-effective has changed. And so these plans were built on assumptions that aren't true. So again, when we get the data to prove what I think is true, I'm going to go back to utilities and say, I can't approve your capacity stuff until you go back and show me that you considered demand response in the context of these prices you are submitting. So if that happens, then we'll be hashing this issue out in 3 different cases. That might be more efficient and it might be more appropriate. So a couple of other points, I'm in favor with, at a minimum, establishing the working group today. At a minimum, requiring them to meet and telling us something, right? We've got a list here. I hear you that maybe the list is too prescriptive, but we need to hear something fast from them. And the other thing is just maybe being too cynical, but what we tell people to do versus what they actually do is 2 different things. Especially in the space that Robert's working in, with these rules, variance requests are common, and frequently we look at them a little more favorably, because for me, if I'm going to grant a variance request, it's got to come with a good reason for why you're asking for the variance. Not like, sorry, I'm busy, or sorry, dog ate my homework. You know, if it's, we met and we agree that it's better to proceed by hashing this issue out in cases, I want to hear that. If it's, we met, we agree that between the IRP rule and the requirement to spend money, it's worth it to put some structure around what that looks like for the load management savings. I'd like to hear that too, but I don't have a judgment which will is the right answer. And then, you know, as Robert pointed out, right now, these programs do exist in the triennial findings. They're pretty meager, again, because there was a lot of discounting what they cost, and then they also create a false set of standards around, hey, this has to be as good as a perfect gas plant. Well, there ain't a perfect gas plant out there. So it's appropriate that there isn't really a hard megawatt target in there, but it needs to be pursued. It's also happening in a world where all the utilities have smart meter approved. So that unlocks potential for demand management that didn't exist before. So it could be not just energy efficiency load management cases, but in their grid mod cases, they should be prioritizing the installation of a certain group of meters to unlock demand response. So anyway, I can't not prioritize this because of the issue of affordability and what we're seeing in terms of what it costs us to build the network bigger. So I'm happy to go ahead and you know, soften up what we're going to require the working group to do, but I want the working group a date for response back. And then I just want to +1 wholeheartedly, EOJ needs to be here. I don't know if we can force them to be here or what, but it's kind of nuts that we're not on this. And I don't know why they're not. Wholeheartedly. Those are my.
I think the way that you opened this issue, Commissioner Nyberg, about talking about, you know, the costs, resources for us, for utilities, for stakeholders, I think. I think that's a good way to think about it. And then obviously there are also the costs to the ratepayer that you would need that they paid for those costs. That's correct. The other side of that is, what are the benefits? And I think the benefits could be less transmission, less generation, and less costs that the ratepayers need to take on. And so that's, I think, the question that I will be looking closely at, or at least I will, if Rachel Whistle will, when we are deciding whether rules are appropriate and whether there are additional efforts that we need to make, is how is that going to impact ratepayers? And if there are cost savings associated with that, that that could be the reason why we would want to move forward. For large customers, I think that could also be an option. There are some different response programs already that they do better. If there's a large customer who's willing to stop making widgets during the peak when system conditions are tight, you know, in exchange for some financial benefit, that could also benefit the rest of the system. And so, I guess the other part of it is that where I think most of the savings will come is that the grid is built to meet that peak demand. And following that necessarily leads you to a certain result that you need to build to meet these many kilowatt hours. But if that peak is lower, then you might have the option to invest less in the grid. You might have the option to offer more service to customers at other times of the day when it's not the peak, if you know that you can meet the load during the time. So those are the things that I'm hoping that we will end up talking about and that the working group would talk about as well. I was not reading the current draft as determining that we're doing a rulemaking. I think it does, one can infer that that's kind of where this would lead to, but I don't think that's necessarily correct. Although I think you make good points that it could be something else. It could just be something else that is satisfactory and would benefit ratepayers. So I'm happy to open the door for that. I like removing the word targets and requirements, because in a way it allows us to think about demand savings or demand response more broadly, and maybe be more open-minded about what potential solutions could be there. And as Commissioner O'Connell noted, I think it's about affordability. When we're looking at across the country and across the state, there are really large loads. Unlikely that we're going to be able to meet that with the generation and transmission we have now. If we actually want those loads to interconnect. So I agree with you that there's growth. I think part of the potential solution is thinking about how we can use less during that peak time. And that's what I was seeing here. The last thing I'll note, and which maybe we should talk about during the communications with commissioners, is you mentioned priorities and rulemakings. Might be a good time to revisit that. Just kind of what we have as our priorities. We've done that before, but we haven't definitely left.
I just wanted to circle back and emphasize something that Chair Aguilera said that is important is, the focus in the historic past has been peak demand, and that's 1 hour of the year. When you look at IRPs now, you'll have critical hours that aren't. And so in addition to maybe attenuating the amount of facility that's needed to meet that 1 hour, the other benefits of demand response and load management are improving reliability during critical hours without having to build more system. And then one of the things I'm planning to talk about in communication versus commissioner is just how applicants carry a burden that they ask for new facilities, that they got to prove that it was the most cost effective among reasonable alternatives. So if they're not doing this, they aren't even ready. Say, I need this power plant, I need this transmission, because this has to happen first in order to be able to credibly say I am building most cost effective. Because, you know, Commissioner Aguilera is right. This may not prevent the building of new system. In fact, I think it'd be crazy to think it will. It might focus the investment, it might make it more efficient, it might be able to defer some things, but all that stuff is worth money and it's an important. I just wanted to pick up on something Bear said.
Mr. Chair, you mentioned that you were good with taking the word target off. I'd be happy to make a motion to amend, make any of the amendments that are on the red line, including taking targets out, obviously, but were there any others that of the changes that you either like or don't like? I'd be happy to make a motion to adopt them all or any portion of them.
So there aren't that many of them, so I've had an opportunity to look at these and I think these are good changes. One thing that I want to make sure of is that it sounds like maybe they are only going to provide a straw proposal if consensus is reached. And I think it kind of goes both ways. Where it might be problematic if we like force them to reach consensus, recognize your arguments there, but also if we tell them don't file anything and don't reach consensus. So maybe there's a middle ground there. Yeah. And I also did not read the initial draft as kind of requiring them to reach a consensus. I think it says attempt to reach consensus, and so I think that's reasonable. And I also think that essentially if there are issues or the principles or ideas that there is consensus on, that is helpful to us. If there is not consensus on a particular issue, it's also helpful to us to know why any parties disagree with that.
Well, my reading of paragraph 6. It says attempt to reach consensus. Paragraph 2 of the original where it said they have to draft and file a straw proposal. What came to mind is who would have authority to draft and file the straw proposal if there was no consensus? Which of the people in the working group have the authority if no consensus is reached? And I didn't see any authority. And then paragraph 3, submit the proposal with supporting documentation. If there's no consensus, who has the authority to submit that? So that's why I put in paragraph 2, couch to if consensus is reached, then do this. If we don't require consensus, we want them to reach consensus. If we want something, then we should allow any party to file their proposed straw proposal to us, and then we have 15 different ideas and we can sort through them all. But it seemed to me that there was some internal inconsistency between paragraphs 1, 2, 3 in the original order. Maybe applicable only to consensus. I'm good either way, but it ought to be clear who has the authority to send us something. Maybe they all do. For requiring consensus, and it ought to be the group as a whole. So I'd say we need to clarify paragraph 6 one way or the other.
Well, I would say in addition to getting rid of targets, you know, I don't have a problem with that, because like I say, I think the target is really the outcome of spend this much money and get everything cost effective. That target falls out of that, and those two things already exist, so it's not a question of establishing something. But you know, the thing you added at the beginning of the first paragraph on page 1, whether commission should establish any rules, I think is a really good question. So maybe just keep the October 31st date, and just say the working group shall file a report, including a straw proposal and any other. And they don't have a consensus on a straw proposal. They don't have to file. I'm looking at paragraphs. And then the other thing that, again, true is I don't. I mean, we could try to perfect this stuff, but again, experience is this pandemic release will give us a variance request if they think there's a better path forward.
Yeah, I actually paragraph C, I think says exactly what how I was thinking about this. Submit any agreed upon straw proposal and any other recommendations. That way. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is fine with me.
Yeah, I agree with the edit. So
Yeah. So maybe we could just take the edited route.
Mr. Chair, then I would move, approval of the order establishing working group in docket number 25-00046-UT with the edits on the red line document that, I handed out earlier. Yes, sir.
Commissioners, I would additionally strike the word targets from the base caption.
And with that additional change.
And also,
yeah, it's funny. I don't read the stuff that's in bold. As if my brain doesn't process it. So why are you going?
do we have any other discussion? In that case, we're ready to vote.
Mr. O'Connell,
Yes.
Mr. Aguilera,
Yes.
Mr. Knapp.
Yes.
The motion to approve the order as edited, passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lundin. Next, we have Mr. Russell Fisk to talk about docket number 2346, which is Paso Electric's application for continued use of its fuel and purchase below cost of adjustment loans.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Matter comes before you on a recommendation from EPE and the recommendation from staff. The commission in February issued a final order in which the commission approved the continuation of EPE's fuel clause. And the commission also partially granted an exception by the city of Las Cruces. The city had requested a prudence review of the fuel clause as well as an audit. The commission denied the prudence review, but did require that EPE come back with a proposal for a limited independent external audit regarding fuel clause costs, revenues and calculations and their process, because there was a billing error in February 2023. The commission in a final order ordered EPE to do requested proposals to auditing firms and to file the results and recommendation as to how to proceed with the audit. And then the commission also ordered staff to file a recommendation in response to that. EPE did file made its compliance filing and recommended that the commission require that the independent audit be done by PricewaterhouseCoopers. EP described that it had contacted 8 auditing firms and received 2 proposals, one from PricewaterhouseCoopers and one from Lauterbach Rothschild. And that EPE recommended using PricewaterhouseCoopers, even though it is a more expensive audit, because Lauterbach doesn't have any experience in the world of public utilities and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Staff, when it filed its recommendations, also recommended using PricewaterhouseCoopers for the same reason. This order would require EPE to retain PricewaterhouseCoopers to conduct the audit and also to comply with staff's additional recommendations surrounding the audit, and would permit EPE to record the costs of the audit as a regulatory asset, but rate making treatment would be left for EPE's next general rate case as per staff recommendation. This order would also deny 2 motions filed by the city. The city filed a motion for leave to respond to EPE's compliance filing because in the commission's final order, the commission finally required staff and didn't to respond to the compliance filing and didn't invite any further intervener comment on that. So this order would deny that on the basis that the city mostly raised the same issues and arguments that are raised in this underlying case, and that those have already been disposed of by the commission. Again, as I said, the commission partially granted what the city wanted in its planning order and rejected a broader scope to the or rejected the previous one. So with that, I will take any questions.
Commissioner, do you have any comments or questions on this item? Well, Mr. Fisk, it looks like we don't have any additional comments or questions, so thank you for the presentation. Mr. Cameron? Well, no, we're not ready for a vote. I would move to approve the order for 23-00046 UT as presented.
I'll second.
Commissioner Nyberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilar?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell?
Yes.
The motion to approve the order as presented passes unanimously, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
So having removed 24-154 from the agenda, we're now on to the discussion section of our agenda. And to present this item, we have Ms. Erin McCoke.
Good morning, commissioners. I wanted to have a discussion today about a possibility that the commission may consider in future cases where the commission knows that a certain type of filing is coming. That would be issuing an order ahead of time before we receive the filing. And there are a few things that I really wanted to leave you to have this discussion amongst yourselves, but before we start that discussion, kind of put some things in your minds. First and foremost is whether or if they are, how these pre-filing orders could enhance efficiency for the commission and set clear expectations for the parties in any upcoming matters. And then ensuring that the orders are seen as proactive and not prejudging. Framing all questions for parties, communicating to the parties, basically what the commission believes it will care about in this upcoming, or in the upcoming proceeding. Whether such an order would improve clarity and predictability and address any potential challenges that the commission or the parties may see coming. And then whether doing so would establish guidelines, or whether we would need to establish guidelines for when and how such pre-filing orders should be used. How, if we were to do this, how would it ensure transparency and fairness in the process? And then if we were to do this and start going through these, at what points and how would we measure effectiveness and refine the process over time? And then in general, how would issuing these pre-filing orders influence the broader agency practices? And as we're going through our kind of strategic plan, how would this help us with improvements in the agency overall? So I guess the broad question is, should we issue pre-filing orders or orders before a case that we know is coming is actually filed with us? And I will leave you to have that discussion, and I need to intervene over. Thank you.
I did have one question. Could you define what the pre-filing order would say or would you?
Yeah, and I don't think this, certainly they wouldn't need to all be the same. You know, each one, this doesn't need to be a one size fits all kind of idea. It would be, but the basic idea would be an order that we would issue in anticipation of a case or an application coming to us. And kind of twofold. One would be in order to expedite the process. If we need to set hearing examiners, if we need to, you know, any of the things that we can do on our end to front load something that we know is coming so that we can be more efficient and kind of get the ball rolling quickly. The second would be if we need to, it's basically, would it be something that we could file where we could tell the applicant or the parties or the anticipated parties basically what the commission is going to care about in the upcoming proceeding? So is there anything specific that the commission, in addition to what the applicant wants to put in the application, but is there anything specific that the commission would like to see in the application? Any questions that they want to have answered? Basically a bench request, but before the application is filed. And the idea really would be to make sure that the commission's questions are answered ahead of time. So again, for efficiency, so we don't have to go back later and discuss and get those questions answered. And also just, you know, there's a transparency, I think, issue where we're saying very clearly, this is what we want to see. This is what we're going to care about in this type of case, and ask for it at the front end instead of later, or even, you know, we don't want to do at the very end.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick this off just because I think it was my agitation that got us here. One of the, you know, just we've improved a lot, I think, in 2.5 years of my experience on the commission. And I'd say searing example of something that first got me on this track that maybe this is a good idea was early on, somebody pointed out to me, hey, with rate cases, we have 30 days to suspend the rates. And then the clock on the rate case begins when we suspend the rates. So we have 30 free days, you know, after the rate case gets filed. So you kind of 9-month suspension, it's really more like 10, you know, if that's the mindset. And in rate case is one of these that falls into the bucket of cases we know are coming, just because there's a wrinkle in time on the future test year rule or law where utilities have to ask for a variance before they file a rate case, just because quarterly closing requirements versus what they're required to file for the future test year calls them to have to ask a variance. So we get a heads up that rate cases are going to get filed. And so then for me, it's really more an explosive, you know, then as we've been working through things and Yeah, we just recently had a case where hearing examiner is like, hey, we've got a 6-month schedule. Working back from the end of that schedule and giving the commission time to have a opportunity to consider things after recommended decision and exceptions, and means that we're gonna have the hearing sooner than people were used to it happening. So that's real also. So if there's something we can do to speed things up before the 6-month calendar starts, that's valuable. And another example where I thought, hey, this is worth exploring is, the economic development projects. There's a process set up where we could have a land rush filings on those projects. Actually, this month is I've got my understanding calendar right. We're committed to following the law and processing those projects. We did a bench request, asking people to give us a heads up if we're intended to file that. And that was exactly this concept is, hey, if we can start assigning people, if we start blocking out the work because we know what's coming, we're going to be more efficient with it when it gets here. So that's really the purpose was, again, I saw it as opportunity to continue to improve the service that we provide, and then benefit for us is trying to make sure that we preserve a little bit of time at the end. So deliberation, and like the kind of thing we did this morning, that was easy to do. It's hard to do. Commissioner Aguilera, you got that. There's rate case. Commission got jammed up at the end of that. They got time to again, so they were working 7 days a week over Christmas to get that done. So anyway, that was the concept. And then I thought Aaron did a great job of describing what it is we're really sketching out here. So minimum of a pre-filing order would just do simple procedural things like, hey, when you do file this, here's your document. And hey, when it does get filed, this is who the hearing examiner is. OGC will have assigned somebody. So we'll be ready to receive it and start working on it the day it gets here, instead of having to go through the process of assigning a hearing examiner. That doesn't take a lot of time, but if you only got 6 months, every day counts, right? So that's a minimum of the value of doing this. The next level, again, times money. If I used to think certain things would be no brainers, right? That you're going to ask for a certain type of thing. It just makes sense that you would include the Excel executable spreadsheet that backs up your exhibits. That's kind of standard practice. It doesn't always happen. If we put it in the order, then it's more likely to happen. And then the advantage is for the applicant, it will reduce one leg of a discovery cycle for them, right? So that's why I would think that these things would happen normally. Don't. Part of it's just the madness of trying to get something filed. You're like, I gotta hit the button on the application, but I still want to make my Excel spreadsheets camera ready or something like that. I'm not changing the numbers, but struggling with feature, looks good, that kind of thing. So that's why those kind of things maybe don't happen. But again, if we put, here's the kind of things that are needed to support an application for this type of case in the order, it could help with efficiency of discovery. And then the third order, which I think is a great discussion, it's going to be case by case, is just sketching out the issues for a case. I see the risk in that is after discovery happens and after interveners get involved, the list of issues can and should grow. So if we're saying, here's the issues, we don't want to be limiting parties' ability to explore a case. We're just saying, I can tell you before we get to the end, here's a list of things that are going to matter at the end. There will be others. So how do you do that without making it look like we're prejudging, without limiting the scope of the case? So for me, example there, we know a merger's coming. If you've got. If you're gonna make a merger application and say things like, hey, this merger approves my ability to finance project. Okay, so your application, maybe you should include your balance sheet right now. Should include income statement right now. So then we have some facts or what things look like to compare to as time goes on. So those are the kind of things that are more debatable about whether you could put that in order. And some of them are also maybe no brainers, you know, good example, and EPE to its credit did this when they file a renewable or renewable plan. They've got this ongoing project that hasn't gotten built yet. It's affecting the plan. Well, address that project before you file it. You're not gonna find that requirement. But it's just, that's an issue that's gonna be considered. If you put it in the application, then to everyone's benefit, the processing of that application. So anyway, that's how I think about it, that the just docket number, assigned hearing examiner, cases we know that are coming, that helps us with a few days. Might save actually a couple of weeks if you got process of OGC writing, order, single signature, sending, you know, I mean, so I am pretty firm and confident that this is a practice we should begin doing. The scope of what goes into those, I think, is really topic by topic. And I really appreciate teeing it up this way because, you know, that's a point you've made several times, Chair, that if we're making changes and people don't know the change is coming, they don't know why we're doing it. It comes from out of left field and we're creating more problems. We're moving backwards a few steps in order to move forward. So I want to avoid that. So anyway, thank you for getting this up this week.
Mr. Chair, I think we need to do everything we can to make the process as efficient as possible. This looks like a step that would lend itself to efficiency. I would be interested to see how the parties, whether they be the utilities or the normal interveners, what their maybe concerns would be. One thing that would come to my mind would be, you mentioned a merger type situation. We read something in the paper, and if we on our own open a docket, then that's going to lend credibility to a newspaper article that may not be accurate. And it may put people in a very awkward position. So we don't want to complicate people's lives through this process. So I think on at least certain subjects, we need to be careful how we go about doing this and not maybe just jump the gun because we hear something on the street. Obviously, we have cases that or things that have to get filed or required to be filed. Those things are coming, and we know when they're coming. So that's routine. I think you easily fit with this. But the merger thing, I could see how that would really go awry, where we would be maybe doing something that would be counterproductive if we jump with that. We don't want to do that. So I would love to get the thoughts of on the issue of mergers or acquisitions. I'd like to hear what the utilities have to say about that. We have one case before it right now. Be interesting to see what their thoughts would be. Would this be an effort to help them through that process, or would it be raising issues that would be a hindrance to their negotiations and process? And maybe in thinking through this, maybe we need a mechanism whereby we can keep things tight, you know, not have them revealed, but still get to the same point of what we're trying to do. So I like it. But I do think we ought to get some input, particularly if we have certain situations where we might potentially cause some complications to a process that is not within our sphere. You know, the negotiations of buying a company, very complex and complicated, and generally you don't want information getting out. Newspapers sometimes don't have things accurately stated. If we just go off something, we could complicate. So I like it, but I would certainly relish the opportunity to discuss some of this with the utilities, with the intervening parties, and others who would have an interest in it. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I think I certainly see the value in letting potential applicant and potential parties know what the commission is going to care about. And Commissioner, you hit on and address kind of the potential drawbacks. Well, you know, somebody could say that we're prejudging the issue. And somebody could say that we're trying to limit, or we're not trying to, but inadvertently limiting the topics. But I think that can be addressed. And you hit on it, Commissioner O'Connell, that these are the issues that we would focus on and not all of the issues, but in addition to all of the issues. I think eventually in the process, the commission might need to make a determination as to what issues are going to be discussed and which ones will not, but that's after providing a fair chance to consider that decision. And I think that it could also be written in a way that does not prejudge a case. We do that carefully, but I think the parties and the applicants, even if they might not want us to tell them what we're going to focus on, it will benefit them to know what we're going to focus on. So I certainly see that. I think other things that we might want to consider is I wouldn't want to inadvertently encourage somebody to file sooner. Things happen. You know, if somebody might have a plan to file something, the utility, and then something happens that delays it. And so I'm wondering if there could be a way to do it without opening a docket. Because if we open a docket and they don't file, then we're closing a docket. I also don't want, I don't know, it seems more preliminary if a docket is not open. And those are a few of the things that I was thinking about.
I was thinking this would be limited to things that are required by rule. Triennial energy efficiency. And you know, if somebody files for a variance on a rate case, they open the document, right, to get the document there. The other case we've been talking about is a merger where they made filing the SEC. So, yeah, there's a risk that they don't file it, but I think that risk is. But anyway, That's a good point, that we don't want to just open placeholders and then.
Yeah, or encouraged to file sooner. I mean, the way the Public Utilities Act is written for many of these things, the utilities are entitled to the right to file it, so I don't necessarily want to tell them to file earlier or file later. It's not, as I see it, for many of these things, up to us. It's our job to consider what is filed, but not necessarily say what you can or can't file or.
Mr. Chair, I think, if everyone understands that we're trying to add efficiency to the process and not, maybe force this or that or well, maybe you said prejudge or predetermined issues. We're just trying to make the process, frankly, for them and for us more efficient. I think with the anticipated workload that's coming down, any efficiency should be greatly appreciated by all. This could be a tool to make us and allow them to be more efficient. So I would hope that we would find that if we talk to them, that there would be a welcoming of this type of process. I think I would anticipate that we would receive favorable comments from all parties, with probably a few caveats and certain things, but I think we can work through it. So for me, this is worth exploring and engaging in discussion with the utilities, with the intervening parties that appear before us on a regular basis, and frankly even with that.
Well, then maybe what we can do is, again, I think there's been a great discussion. I know people are listening to it. Is invite anybody who heard it and has a opinion on it, get a hold of Aaron. That might help us with understanding concerns beyond what we've raised here, or identifying risks that we're not seeing. And we can always do baby steps, and I think we frankly already have by asking people to give us already if they're gonna pilot how these economic. So anyway, that's what I would suggest. That might be a great way to. Again, don't want to preclude other people's ideas.
Would it be helpful for us to send a letter to the parties that generally appear in cases and solicit comments?
Talk about the 1,000 address certificate of service that includes dead people.
Are there, well, hopefully dead people aren't appearing regularly before us. Do we have a?
I haven't seen them appear, but they get an email. Is there some mechanism to even publish something? I think soliciting some comments or, we just formed a work group for demand response. And whether that be helpful or not, but I know that there's probably a lot more things that could be done, a lot more ideas out there that would help with the efficiency part that probably those of us on this side of the table don't see. Soliciting comments to make the whole process more efficient. Thank you. Big up over there. Any suggestions?
As a matter of fact, I do, Mr. Former Chair.
That's the least.
The commission could open a non-adjudicatory notice of inquiry and ask for. The problem is who to send it to. There is a wide ranging list that we could use as the service list for that. But we could do that, and that is specifically, you know, what I'm trying to think about as we're talking through this is our ex parte issues and making sure that we're not talking specifically about any docket that may be coming, that an attorney who's representing an entity knows is coming. So in order to do that, our rule specifically excludes non-adjudicatory notices of inquiry, which are issues of broad applicability to consumers or regulated. This sounds like it fits pretty squarely within that. So if the commission wanted to, I would suggest that's the way to do it, and just looking it up and put some parameters there in terms of what we're thinking, some of the things that we're talking about today. Some of the ideas that to look at and see where it goes. Dave?
Well, and since July is over, I'll say, hey, this sounds like a great single signature order.
Okay, okay. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Feature of the month. It's like. There's no rush. No rush, but be perceptive.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for that discussion. That was helpful. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Get out from under the bus here before I move on. Great. Well, good discussion. Thank you. Next item is communications with Chief of Staff.
Vacation photos.
Good morning, commissioners. I've prepared a short slide deck of approximately 250 photos that I'll walk you through. No slide deck. Glad to be back though. So just a quick update. Things are rocking and rolling. Even we have an amazing team. So it turns out I'm not really as necessary as maybe we all think. Everybody did a great job holding things together and keeping things moving. And because of that, I actually have updates for you, even though I've been on the ground 40 hours. So first and foremost, the gift from SPO that I told you about that was coming regarding our classification restructuring for our employees, that has now been implemented. And unsurprisingly, there have been some bumps in the process, including putting some of our employees in incorrect classifications or incorrect positions within their new classification structure. We've already alerted SPO to these errors. They are working on fixing it. They are prioritizing those errors that have direct and immediate pay implications. If that affects one of our employees, HR has already been in touch with them, and so they know what to expect there. HR will be continuing to provide communications agency-wide and to affected employees. If employees have questions, they should reach out to their division directors. We have also requested that SPO do I can't read my own writing, a class study. So making sure that our employees, and as we know, many of the things that we do in our agency is really unique to our agency. So we requested that they look at some of our classes of employees to make sure that they're comparing them to the right other types of jobs and make sure that they're appropriately placed within the overall scheme of the nation state. Unfortunately, those things take many months, and so I am not anticipating that we will hear back this month or next. But we will be staying on SPO to make sure those things are appropriately allocated for our employees. We've also, on the budget side, we're now done with FY 25. That closed at the beginning of July. We are working on our audit for FY 25. Our auditors will be on site next week doing test work. The chair and I will be meeting with them to get that audit underway. And we are also planning FY 27 because that request is due September 2nd. And we will be presenting, Miranda, our CFO, will be presenting that budget request to you before the end of August for approval. We did very well in our request for this last session. And so rather than a, roughly 20% increase, we're looking at something around 7 or 8, trying to keep it modest and making sure that we're still giving room to keep our employees compensated and competitive in the market. And then last but not least, I think they planned it on purpose for a while I was out, but the Spiridian project, our e-docket replacement, had its first test run. So our SMEs, our subject matter experts, and some of our employees got a peek into what it's going to look like. That happened last week, and from all accounts, people are encouraged and pretty excited about where that's headed. So still looking to be on track for a go live date in January, but getting to see behind the curtain is encouraging as we see what we're developing and what's good. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
I just say congratulations on that milestone with the Spiridian project. I know a lot of people are working on that. And it's a big undertaking. Good news.
Very, very exciting. Yeah, I very much look forward to it. So thank you. And then just quickly for that budget that we'll need to approve by the end of the month, we might need to have a special open meeting. It will be very quick, and this will be virtual. Thank you. Actually, this might still be, you don't need to move, but this might still be communication with chief of staff. So the one thing that I wanted to talk about is just kind of the prioritizing of rulemakings, because it sounds like it might be a good time in the near-ish future, not the next meeting but maybe to make sure that we're updated on kind of what rulemakings we have going on and have a chance to look at that and determine to have another conversation about priorities. That might not be necessary, but maybe at least for now, just sending around an updated rulemakings list. That way we can decide if we want to.
Mr. Chair, I actually have an updated rulemakings list, and I'd be happy to send that around. Just take a look at, and then you can have the conversation.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Had a great meeting at NARUC, and things that were learned on some of these large load demands that are being placed on most commissions around the country. It was interesting to note that in Georgia, they've adopted a policy that they won't even consider one of these large load demand data centers until they receive a check for $1 million up front to try to separate the wheat from the chaff, because a lot of commissions are complaining that they're getting a lot of requests in, and then because of the competition, a lot are dropping out. Yet they've spent resources and spent time and effort in trying to figure this out for the utility. And so, the utilities in Georgia, at least, uh, for getting a check up front before anything gets done. And, I don't know what the process would be here, but, if we start getting those types of requests, we probably need to have some mechanism to separate the wheat from the chaff. So the utilities, we aren't just chasing out after greens that have no substance. And then in Kansas City at the Southwest Power Pool meetings in Kansas City earlier this week, there's some good news and maybe some not so good news, maybe mediocre news. But they did approve, maybe Commissioner O'Connell can talk a little bit more about the consolidated planning process that they're instituting, and hopefully that will be a mechanism that not only achieves efficiency, but probably will be picked up elsewhere if it indeed works as planned. The other thing, there was a 115 kV line that was approved 19 miles in Eddy and Lee counties. That bid went to Southwestern Public Service Company. They were the low bidder on that project, so that was awarded. Again, supplying some transmission needs in Eddy and Lee County that is sorely in need of additional electric infrastructure. On the other hand, Southwestern Public Service Company is having to wait until November to see whether or not it's fairly significant extension of not extension, a new, very large kV line, a 765 kV line that will run from Amarillo, Texas, down to Phantom Substation in Eddy County, and I believe that's in southern Eddy County. Again, supply power to the huge demand from the oil and gas sector in Eddy and Lee counties. And the SPP had an initial estimate of, I think, $1.6 billion for that line. SPP looked at it, and because it goes through the prairie chicken habitat on the east side of the state, they had to figure a route that extended a number of additional miles to the proposal that maybe SPP was looking at. And it came in at $3.6 billion to complete that line. And the SPP board was taken back by that tremendous additional expense. And there was an effort to maybe open it up for a competitive process but ultimately the board decided to delay the decision on that to its November meeting. I know the folks in southeastern New Mexico are upset over what seems to be continued delays with electric infrastructure. Hopefully the NextEra Energy will commence the building of that transmission line that was approved a couple of years ago this month. They'll supposedly start construction this month, which should help ease the demand burden and the ability of Southwestern Public Service to issue meters for a lot of new installations down there. I think it's been about 35 months since the meter was issued down in that area because there's a lack of energy that can get there. So another delay, but hopefully in November that vote will be taken and that 765 kV line will be approved for construction. And it's a reliability line, and it's the first of what I saw is several 765 kV lines that are going to be proposed in the Southwest Power Pool footprint in the next few years. So transmission is at the forethought of everyone's mind at this point. And trying to get electrons moved around the country is a challenge and frankly, a very expensive endeavor. But that's kind of a report from Southwest Power Pool, and I'd like to close commending our own Commissioner O'Connell. I could tell you he's president of the Regional State Committee, which is the commissioners from all the states in the SPP area. And he not only ran a great meeting, but he's very well respected. And they certainly are privileged to have him at the helm. And his sidekick, Agatha Malik, on our staff, did a great job in reporting. And she's very engaged in the issues that come up there. So we're pleased to have that representation on that board. And I want to personally thank Matt for his leadership and his ability to run very good, efficient meetings and represent us well. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Commissioner Nyberg. Similar to you, I covered the same ground you did. I was in Boston and then Kansas City. My Boston trip, the big takeaways for that were, we began on Sunday morning with this FERC NARUC collaborative, and the topic was RTO governance with emphasis or focus on resource adequacy and how different RTOs deliver that. And then just the way that's structured, there's 2 commissioners from each of the 5 neighborhood regions. And so you had from extremes, the mid-Atlantic states and their participation in PJM, to the Southeast states where there's not anything, and they are very happy that there isn't. So, the West was kind of an interesting bit in the middle. You have organization out West. It's we have California ISO, and there's also lots of initiatives that are out there, like the transmission planning groups, PREPC, YRAP, RAP, reserve sharing groups. So there's all these little things where the type of services that are provided by RTOs happen out West. They just aren't happening in normal organized fashion. So anyway, that for me, just learning about that was very educational. That particular collaborative is in a big state of unknown at the moment. Every commissioner got a letter saying if you want to participate, please apply. So it sounds like neighbors wanting to flush out the 10 of us that were on that and replace us, give everybody else new opportunities. And meanwhile, don't really know what's going to happen at FERC. That last one was led by FERC Commissioner Christie, and he appropriately received a lot of gratitude for his service as a commissioner. But that was kind of his last go there. And right now there's only 3 commissioners. Not exactly sure who's going to be chair. So we'll see how that plays out. It was a 3-year project, so I would expect it'll be where that's going. And then on Monday, I moderated a panel about resource adequacy, and the experts we had on the panel talked about things like how levelized cost can lead you down a wrong path if you're trying to analyze a system where different parts play different roles. And then with some pointed criticism of the Lazard LCO that gets printed every year. Then we had Lawrence Berkeley National Labs talking about what they see being done with resource planning across the country, and emphasizing that you really have to plan for complexity. So it's like complexity isn't the scenario, it's the truth. And so You know, it kind of flips the paradigm of what are scenarios and what are sensitivities on its head if you're planning for complexity. And then representative from ESIG was there and he highlighted a lot of the tools that that group has developed working with utilities. How to implement these ideas, like don't simple-mindedly think about costs of projects and plan for complexity. So that makes your planning complex. So ESIG and working with folks to try to help figure that out. So it was a good panel. We had, it was right after lunch, full room, and nobody fell asleep. So that's a success. And then the other thing that really fell out of that being there was, you know, we've got the Western Conference is gonna be in New Mexico next June. We're next up. So now that we're next up, folks are coming at us with offers to sponsor requests for field trips and like that. If we can pull it off, if we can help people go out to Corona to see what we saw, that would be amazing. So more of a logistics question. So anyway, came away from that with new sense of urgency on working on planning for the conference. So Jennifer Baca and I are going to check out the site this weekend and then meet with the managers Monday morning. Then we'll convene Joya and Jordan and Jennifer and I, and we're going to start, we need to start like blocking out the schedule. We need to start thinking about who's going to handle these offers to sponsor that. So anyway, I was thinking, yeah, that's something in the future, but there were so many people talking to me about it. I was like, the future is fair warning. So we're going to. And then, you know, you did a great job of describing the big topics at that quarterly meeting at the city. The RSC did approve a bunch of administrative items like RTO West is going to happen. So bylaw revision, so we can add commissioners or something. And budget and those type of things. And then there were a number of planning and policy matters on there, like congestion rights, safe harbor limits. But the big one was what you talked about, consolidated planning process. The promise of that is they're taking 3 independent tracks on planning processes and putting it into one holistic process and reducing the amount of time that process takes. And I mean, that was one of my takeaways when I went to that trip to the UK is anybody that's taken 6 months to a year to do a generation interconnection study, that's kind of unforgivable. And then the fact that those studies take so long, it causes weird things to happen. I would include part of the discussion around that 765 kV project is just they went too fast on one piece of the planning process and we're seeing bad consequences for that math. And if you're a generator, you might put your generator in a bunch of places and then hold a spot. And so it becomes a commodity that you have an interconnection instead of reality of generation. And then the large load is this 5 data centers or one that's asked to be located in 5 different places. If the planning process was better, and one of the big features of better, it's faster, you get rid of the incentive to do that kind of gaming for the system. So it took a long time for SPP to develop that CP process. What happened Monday is FERC filing. So next step will be hopefully approval of that by FERC and then start seeing the benefits of that. But as you talked about, the big conversation was this SPS transmission line, Potter County Crossroads to Phantom. And it was fascinating discussion, especially having come from that RTO governance thing in Boston, right? Because there's a lot of states that are really angry at their RTOs. And one of the main reasons why was on full display in Kansas City. And I don't you know, in the world of sympathy versus empathy, I think the process didn't serve the board very well. I don't think it served SPS very well. And then it's not gonna serve us very well because we're gonna eventually tasked with location permit, rate treat for this transmission line, because the consensus is the transmission line is needed, right? That was the one thing that everybody seemed to agree on. The process that was used was they did a real rush job on coming up with potential solutions for the transmission problem. That rush job resulted in SPP estimating the cost at this 1.7 billion. And in hindsight, that was obviously wrong. You know, they just, as the crow flies, measured the distance from Potter County substation to Phantom, and that was the length of the line. Now, you need a 250 right away width, you're gonna bump into cities on the way through, you know that. And then, you know, habitat, there's existing oil and gas facilities, there's a ton of stuff that has to be threaded through to build the line. So most of this increase in the cost estimate from 1.7 to 3.6 billion was just because SPP got the length of the line. And then where empathy and sympathy aren't the same thing. There was a window where SPS was awarded the project with this price tag of 1.7 billion to now, when to their credit, they alerted folks, we can't build it for that much, it's gonna cost more, before they were required to do it. So that forced the discussion that happened yesterday, but in that window, the cost went up, and there was more reasons than just the line was too short. So they're gonna be now in a situation where they're gonna have to explain that this line, they really did work to make it as low cost as possible. I mean, because that's our requirement when we're looking at it. And they're behind the 8 ball to make that argument, because first of all, just optically, you know, 1.7 versus 3.6 billion is hard to explain. It could be 3.6 billion is the right number, then that's the number SPP should have used. How are we gonna figure that out? So, you know, this window that you described where the board's like, we need to think about it a little bit. SPS has been asked to try to provide solutions, and anything SPS can do that improves the confidence that this really is as cheap as that can be. I would encourage them to take the board up on that, but the bigger issue is SPP's planning process. Right? So this project just happened to highlight huge flaw in the process. So how far will SPP go to fix that process is kind of an open question, and it's something that we should lean into as time goes on. So I'm pretty confident a task force is going to form around each project should be competitively bid, right? Because that would help SPS a lot. If this project was competitively bid and that's what the price is, then you don't have to wonder, gee, what happened in that once where the cost went up and only they had control of the project. So anyway, that's a big thing that came up. Can't say. And then going back to where I began, this whole RTO governance thing, this project was proposed by SP staff as a consent agenda item with the innocuous term of out of bandwidth. So what that meant is the project estimate had grown more than 30% than what they'd used in their. So they were just trying to sneak that one under the radar. I don't know why, but to the board's credit, they pulled it off the consent agenda. If they hadn't, there wouldn't have been the big rehash, and then SPS would be in even worse shape than they are as a result of how SPP teamed up with the project. So anyway, it's just weird how between Boston and Kansas City, they just bookend with this discussion about RTOs. One thing I do have to report on that is, I've been involved in this pathways discussion where they're trying to create a regional organization that we could use out west. Early on, the commissioners involved in that, and I'll credit Letha Tawny in Oregon, but she's had unanimous support from all of us. Trying to embed in the DNA of that regional organization that affordability means what do customers pay for this stuff? Because that was the discussion at SPP. They think about affordability as a business to business transaction. There's no line of sight down to bills. And when people were asking, well, at this higher price, is this still a good project? Their response was, oh, we've got at least $1 billion more before it becomes not cost effective. I was really having a hard time not coming out of my chair, because that's just the result of their engineering planning studies. It isn't because their first thought is these projects need to be as low cost as possible. Well, it still works even if, hey, for some reason we spend $1 billion more than 3.6 billion. So anyway, that was in my time at SPP, Kansas City. And then just last thing I just wanted to share with whoever, 811 day in New Mexico isn't August 11th, it's August 8th. We're gonna have I'm gonna go to the 811 center on Tuesday tomorrow. We're gonna have a little event to highlight value of looking forward to seeing Jason Montoya pipeline down there. So anyway, sorry for the long update, but a lot happened in 2 weeks.
Well, thank you for that. Also appreciate you working on that. As the president for the RSC.
I've been telling them I don't want to, I'm trying not to take this stuff personally. Yeah, oh yeah, RSC, they used to have like 3 votes a year. Not anymore.
So I think the next item on the agenda is adjournment, unless anybody, right before. Well, unless anybody objects, something like it, we are adjourned.